to Red Cedar Radar. I am joined today by familiar face of Brendan. We are going to break down Ohio State as we preview their matchup against Michigan State on Saturday. How are you today, Brendan?
Doing good. Football season's kind of going by really fast. Already 4 games in for Michigan State. So big game against the Buckeyes of Ohio State, who haven't really been tested yet, have they?
Yeah, no, I was just kind of reading up about their past games, and I watched a little bit of the Marshall game, and this is their first Big Ten matchup. And yeah, I'll be curious to see, how much they step their game up coming into, Spartan Stadium. Let's just jump right in and talk about Ohio State. So, like we said, first Big Ten matchup. I watched the Marshall game, but I didn't watch their other two kind of non-conference matchups. Any notes? Did you see either of those any of those games at all? Any notes from their non-conference matchups?
They're still trying to get things figured out. I think on the offensive line, that was kind of the big question mark for them coming into the season, was that offensive line. Obviously, they have a new quarterback with Will Howard. I think he's been playing decently. I think there's an improvement at that quarterback position from last year. Ohio State's still trying to figure a few things out up front, but overall, this is a really deep team, and there's a reason why they're still ranked so highly, even though they've played 3, group of 5 teams in non-conference play and wiped the floor with them. So Ohio State, as always, ultra talented. And Jeremiah Smith, he's a true freshman. If you don't know who he is, get to know who he is, because he leads the team in receiving. He's probably their best receiver. And this is Ohio State we're talking about. We're not talking about, Western Michigan, Central Michigan. No offense to them, but Ohio State is like wide receiver U. And they have a true freshman leading the team in receiving. He's the best receiver on that team. So this team is very talented. A veteran group on defense as well, especially up front. They bring back a lot of guys who honestly should be NFL players right now. Right? I mean, JT Tuimoloau, some of the other guys, Williams at defensive tackle there. So Jack Sawyer's another name up front to watch. So they got a lot of guys on this defense that have played a lot of college football. And honestly, they should be in the NFL right now, which is crazy to think about.
Something that I thought was interesting that I read from the Marshall game was that the defensive coordinator for Ohio State, Jim Knowles, put out kind of a statement that was like, I'm not choosing a defensive player of the game. I don't think anyone worked hard enough. No one deserves the honor. So I'll be curious to see how they play on defense against Michigan State, if that really fires them up, or if there really is like an effort related problem for them on defense. I don't imagine that there probably is. It probably was just playing more down to the opponent that they had in Marshall. But I thought that was an interesting quote for a non-conference game.
That is interesting. And we do know that, Ohio State, super high standards there. And it's not like I didn't notice that they had any effort-related problems in that Marshall game, or they didn't play bad. I'm looking at the box score right here from that Marshall game, 2.9 yards a carry Marshall had. They held Marshall 264 total yards. Marshall, a couple of things, though, that do stand out a little bit. Marshall did have 36 minutes of the possession. I don't value time of possession all too much. 18 first downs is up there. Third down efficiency, Marshall is 7 for 17. So certainly some things that Ohio State needs to clean up. But, I don't think any less of the Buckeyes after than what I did in the preseason. So
Yeah. Anything to mention about offense? We talked about, anything to mention about defense in addition to kind of that note? You talked a little bit about offense, but anyone to know on defense for Ohio State?
Yeah, they do have some good players in the secondary as well. It's not just a team that's dominant up front. Caleb Downs was arguably the best player in college football last year. He's a safety, transferred from Alabama. Now he's at Ohio State. So he's a guy to watch. He hasn't put up a whole lot of stats. I think he only has like 8 or 9 tackles this year, so nothing crazy, but curious to see how much Michigan State kind of throws at him in the pass game. But they got other safeties out there that are really talented. Hancock for them. He's a corner. He has 3 pass breakups so far. This team is just a solid team all around. They're going to challenge Michigan State in a whole lot of different ways. So arguably probably going to be the most talented team that Michigan State plays so far. Turnover ratio, because I know that's a theme kind of for Michigan State early in the season's turnovers. Ohio State's only +2, so they haven't been forcing a whole lot of turnovers per se. But yeah, this team definitely outclasses Michigan State in terms of strictly talent.
Yeah. I think I was reading some quotes that Jonathan Smith put out about people were asking him like, are you going to measure your season on this matchup against Ohio State? What's your opinion on that?
It, no, you can't because they're not comparable to the level Michigan State is at right now.
Hmm.
I mean, if they lose, you can't. If Michigan State loses, the Jonathan Smith can't be like, okay, it's time to hit the panic button, right? No matter what the score is, the score could be 150 to nothing. This game is not going to mean that much, kind of in the grand scheme of things, because you're 24-point underdogs or so, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, it is a chance to see for these players, for this coaching staff to see, okay, this is what the class of the Big Ten looks like. This is what Michigan State needs to get up to in these next few years, because this is what they're going to be competing with. I mean, it's not just Ohio State too. It's Oregon, it's USC, it's Penn State, it's Michigan. But Ohio State right now, they look to be the class of the Big Ten this year, and they have been over the past decade, 2 decades. So yeah, it's definitely a big test.
In my mind, and correct me or share your opinion if you don't agree, but in my mind, if Michigan State gets blown out, you can kind of just say, well, first year rebuilding. But if Michigan State has a good showing and plays, better and, better than expectations, I think that means more than however bad they lose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like if you're looking at this from a fan perspective, I think the result shouldn't really matter all too much. I know this
Yeah.
is a performance based, you know, job and sports. So right, you're
Right.
judged based on your performance and result, wins and losses. But fans, I think, should be looking this through the lens of, okay, is Aiden Childs improving? Is he cutting
Right.
down on those interceptions? Are the penalties down, which they were last game? They continue to be down on the
Yeah.
penalties. Be a little bit more disciplined, play a little smarter. Uh, stuff like that. I just want to see, and fans, I think, should want to see improvements while also knowing, okay, Ohio State is the vastly superior team here. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I absolutely agree. Let's jump into talking about Michigan State a little bit because Childs is on my list of things to talk about. So 7 interceptions this year. The end of the Boston College game, I felt like things just kind of got away from him and he wasn't able to kind of regain his composure. What do you think was the difference in him in the first half versus the second half of that Boston College game? Because I thought in the first half there was some things that went wrong, but he seemed very poised. And then the second half, it felt like the wheels fell off a little bit more for him. Do you think it's just the pressure, or I guess what were your thoughts from the Boston College game as far as Childs goes?
Yeah, it's hard to say. He's a young quarterback. He's going to make mistakes, but I mean, I think he was just getting excited, like
Yeah,
on that last interception he had,
yeah,
which I mean, the last drive of the game for Michigan State saw Montori deep in the end zone and threw
hmm
it into double coverage. I think that's just being young and dumb, right? Uh,
right,
so obviously, Childs has room to improve there. A lot of room to improve in that respect. Uh, yeah, I just think he's gonna make mistakes, and I don't think there was a huge drop off from the first half to the second half. I guess part of it could have been Michigan State didn't start the second half very well, right? I mean,
right,
K. Lynch Adams had that fumble, and I
hmm
think he tries through an interception
yeah,
on that very next drive. So I mean, could have snowballed a little bit after that. Confidence could have gone down a little bit after that. And I know he's very critical of himself. He said this week we had him for media availability, and he was like, after the game, I cried. He
yeah,
said that straight up. He looked for comfort in his teammates, which they provided, but he's very critical of himself. So yeah, I'm hoping for an improved uh, and I guess a consistent Aiden Childs throughout this Ohio State game.
yeah, absolutely. I think I I was talking to our publisher Ryan about after the game, and I feel like he has such a high ceiling, and because he holds himself to such a high standard, I think we'll see that in the next couple years. I think that's something that's coming down, the lane for him, but he just needs to kind of clean things up and grow and gain in these experiences of these big games. Because I think this year will be his springboard, and I think we'll see a different version of him next year. I mean, we've already seen a different version of him, I think, in some aspects as the games continue. I'll be curious to see what he's looking like at the end of the season as far as like these fixable or sort of fixable errors.
Yeah, and this isn't just an Aiden Childs thing. Like, there's a ton of
Right.
young quarterbacks across the country on some really good teams. Like, I think of Avery Johnson for Kansas State, had a lot of turnovers against BYU, and BYU, I think they won 38-9 on Saturday. So, some of these young quarterbacks are struggling. Oklahoma's Jackson Arnold got benched in the game
Mhm.
against Tennessee on Saturday. He's not even going to start this week. So it's, young quarterbacks sometimes they just work out right away, and that's kind of the best case scenario, obviously. But sometimes it just takes time. And Childs, I don't think he's in any danger of losing his job or anything like that, or he's going to get benched. But yeah, he's got room to improve, and I have no doubt that he definitely has a talent to improve. And I think if he were to be making these same mistakes week over week over week, and it bleeds into next year, then you
Mhm.
start to think, oh, okay, maybe he isn't
Yeah.
the guy anymore. But at
Yeah.
this point, Childs is 100% should be Michigan State's quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of other things, as far as MSU's last few games, injuries, especially with Boston College, they had a couple key guys, or some notable guys that were out. Do we have we heard anything about anyone coming back after being out last week? Any updates on that at all?
We have not heard anything on the wide receiver front. I know four of them were out last week against Boston College. Most notably, Nick Marsh. We don't know. We'll see on Saturday, about 2 hours before the game is when the availability report usually gets released. So we'll see if Marsh is playing or not. Uh, as it relates to Antonio Gates, again, still a question mark. Jerron Glover, still a question mark. We don't know. We'll kind of learn with the availability report. And the fourth receiver was Alante Brown. We do know he's out for the season. So
Yeah.
he's going to be gone for the rest of the year. But the three receivers, Glover, Marsh, Gates, we'll find out on Saturday around 5:30ish
Hmm. Hmm.
about their
Anything
injury
else?
situation.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about as far as MSU's past games or leading into Ohio State? What are your expectations for them, like keeping it realistic for this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, so it's easy to sit here and say, yeah, Ohio State's going to win. But the question is there a path for Michigan State to keep this competitive? And I legitimately think there is. Now, a lot of things need to go right. A, turnovers need to be pretty much cut out for the most part. I think they need to win the turnover battle by one or two or something like that. That requires Childs to only throw maybe one pick or hopefully no picks, taking care of the football, no fumbles. But Ohio State, really, they haven't been challenged. And you see a lot of these top teams across the country, they might struggle sometimes when it's their first challenge against kind of a power conference opponent that can actually kind of go toe to toe with them a little bit at the line of scrimmage or in the secondary and whatnot. So there is a reason to believe that Ohio State could get off to a slow start. It's their first road game as well. And like I said, though, this is a veteran group for Ohio State, so it's not like they have not been on the road before, but it's the first road game of the year at night. I expect Spartan Stadium to be loud and to be rocking. So there is a path where Ohio State gets off to a slow start, and I think Michigan State's defense has been playing well. So I don't think Ohio State's going to go out there and it's going to be bombs away and then we score on every drive. I just don't think that's realistic. So I think Michigan State, I think they can keep this kind of a 1 to 2 possession game at halftime. I think that would be good, and then hopefully keep it competitive going into the second half, going into the fourth quarter. But yeah, I don't think there's really a super realistic path for them to win this game outright. Like I said, if they were to win this game outright and pull off a huge upset, I mean, probably one of the biggest upsets of the year if they do pull it off. Uh, Turnovers need to be pretty much cut down, and Childs needs to hit these explosive plays because from what I saw, I don't think the run game is really going to have consistent success. They did not have consistent success against Boston College. Now you're facing a step up in Ohio State's defensive front, so I don't think that run game is going to be consistent enough on offense. So how do you kind of cancel that out? Explosive plays. Childs in the pass game, hitting his downfield targets, being accurate with the football, and hopefully Nick Marsh is back for that reason. Hopefully, Glover is back because they provide some of those deep threats. And I kind of hope Nick Marsh plays because I think it'll be fun. You get to watch two of the best true freshman wide receivers kind of go toe to toe on Saturday. So for selfish purposes and for just entertainment purposes, I hope Marsh is back. See him and Smith go head to head there at the wide receiver position. So I'm looking forward to this game. There's a lot of talent kind of on both sides for both teams. But yeah, I think Ohio State's going to win. Uh, Score prediction, I think it's going to be roughly around like a 38-17 type of game is how I see it.
Yeah, and I think that score prediction matches up with a lot of what I saw as I was getting ready for this episode. People are thinking kind of about that distance. Not a blowout by any means. And I think MSU can keep it close, like you said, until halftime. And if I think a good test will be how they play in the second half. Does the offense step up, and can the defense keep up with playing the way that they have been playing? So I think that's a good measure, kind of that after halftime.
Yeah, and this rush defense is also going to get tested. I mean, I watched that Ohio State game against Marshall, and they were gashing them on the ground with Judkins and with Henderson. Ohio State's got two really good running backs there that can get explosive plays on the ground. So Michigan State's run defense is really going to get tested. And what happens if they kind of stack the box? Obviously, they can throw over the top with Mika Buka and Jeremiah Smith. So, I mean, it's kind of a balancing act. Is they got to execute at a high level. So we'll see.
So let's take a bigger picture look, I guess. After seeing Boston College, what do you think about MSU kind of season overall?
Yeah, I don't think my opinion changed a whole lot. Obviously, there's been more turnovers than I've expected so far, and that can really kill a game and kind of kill a season, right? If you just keep turning the ball over and over, because you can outgain teams, you can be the better team on any given day. But if you
Mm-hmm.
turn the ball over 3-4 times, lose the turnover
Right.
margin by two or three turnovers, then it's really hard to win football games. Uh,
Yeah.
but overall, I still think this team has the ability to go to a bowl game, but I mean, the schedule has gotten a lot tougher. I think Indiana's a good
Mhm.
team,
Yeah.
based on what I know. They haven't really played a good opponent yet. Their best one's against UCLA, who has not looked good so far this year. But I do think Indiana's a good team. Their coach over there did a good job kind of reloading talent from the transfer portal. Illinois is ranked undefeated, and that game's on
Mm-hmm.
the road. So that game's gotten tougher all of a sudden. They got another ranked team on the schedule. So, see, I still think this team's going to find a way to get to 6 wins and get to a bowl game. Rutgers is not going to be an easy win. So, look, there's going to be a lot of toss-up games on this schedule, right? I think Ohio State, I think they're going to lose that game. I think they're going to lose the Oregon game. But games against, Iowa, Michigan's not what they once were. I still
Yeah.
think they're a good football team, but they're not what they were, last couple of years. Indiana, I think, is a solid team. Illinois is a solid team. Rutgers is a solid team. So there's a lot of toss-up games that might come down to turnovers. And right now, at Michigan State, I have some question marks on whether they can win a good chunk of those games. So I do think they have the ability to find a way to win some of these.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that the Boston College game, like you said, changed too much for me either. I mean, they played competitively. If they were to clean up those things that had gone wrong of their own errors, I think it would have been, a completely different game. They kind of could have been more on top of things the whole time. So I think with Childs, going back to what you said about him being so hard on himself, I hope that he can use that to clean that up, because I think that will be necessary to win some of those maybe more toss up games as we're heading into kind of that harder play. Anything else you want to talk about as far as Michigan State's season or the matchup against Ohio State?
Uh, I mean, a lot of tough games ahead. I mean, also, you got to think about health as well. I mean, they've been bit by the
Mm-hmm.
injury bug, seen yet again this year. So
Yeah.
hopefully, Spartans can stay healthy. I know secondary's kind of gotten eaten up with some injuries. Uh, so, yeah, health is also something to watch over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's your opinion on Ryan Day as a coach? And I know you're not an Ohio State fan. Well, I guess I don't know if you're an Ohio State fan or not, but
I am not.
okay. I didn't want to put that out on the internet if it wasn't true. But what do you think? I feel like Ohio State has been an at-large program for as long as I remembered, but I haven't seen them, you know, finish at the end of the year very consistently. What do you think about like his tenure at Ohio State, and like what's the future for that? Is it championship or bust, or will they keep him around forever?
Yeah, as much as I hate to say that it's championship for bust, because there's just so many teams in college football. If we hold every team, to that standard, then a lot of coaches are going to get fired after 3 years.
Right.
But it does feel like championship or bust this year for Ohio State. At least Big Ten
Mhm.
championship, and at least making it to at least to the semifinals of the college football playoff, right? It kind of
Mhm.
feels that way because they spent, 8 figures or so on this roster to bring in
Yeah.
the likes of Caleb Downs, Quinshaw Judkins, Will Howard, the quarterback from the transfer portal. So they spent
Yeah.
a lot of money on these guys, and they arguably have the best roster in college football. So I think anything less than a Big Ten championship and making it to the semifinals would be kind of a failure of a season.
Yeah.
However, on the other hand, two things can kind of be true at once. I don't think Ryan Day should be fired just because he hasn't won a national championship. He's really close. He is really close, and he's just got to
Mhm.
get over that final hurdle. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, he was born on third base. He inherited a great program." Yeah,
Yeah.
but when you're on the top, everyone's gunning for you. So
Right.
it's hard. It's hard to stay at the top, and Ryan Day's kind of done that. And the Michigan game obviously is going to be big for Ohio State. Losing 4 in a row against them, that's not going to go over well with
Mhm.
that fan base, those
Yeah.
boosters, those alumni. So, and I know Ryan Day does not want that to happen. So he's doing everything in his power to not let that happen. So I do think Ohio State's on the right trajectory, and I think Day's a good coach. To become a
Mhm.
great coach or an elite coach, he does have to get over that hump, win the Big Ten, and win a national championship eventually.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't think that they will ever let him go. I think he's kind of cemented his place there at Ohio State, but it just feels like he's getting there, and maybe he's been halted a couple times recently where I thought, oh, maybe this is the year. So again, maybe this is the year. We'll have to see. But they do have the talent, like you said. So I'll be curious to see how that goes for them kind of at the end of the season. I think that's all we have for this preview episode of the Ohio State matchup against Michigan State. So you can watch the game on Peacock. It's a 7:30 kickoff at Spartans Stadium. So Brendan and I will both be there under the lights in the press box watching the game. And I
Yeah,
will. Go ahead.
if you don't want to spend your money on a Peacock subscription, spend your money on a Spartans Illustrated subscription. You can receive live updates from Spartan Stadium from us.
Oh, amazing. We'll be in the forum chatting. So please join. We'd love to
Yep.
have you. Yeah, check out Spartans Illustrated. Consider subscribing. We have an awesome team that's pumping out tons of stuff for football season and basketball season, which they just started practice very recently. So I'm excited for that. And they take on Northern Michigan in an exhibition game coming up here in just a couple weeks. So yeah, check out Spartans Illustrated and subscribe to Red Cedar Radar wherever you listen to podcasts, and check us out on YouTube. I will be back next week with another preview episode. And I wanted to say that I'm sorry that I missed last week, but thanks for everyone that reached out on Twitter. I was just feeling a little sick. You didn't want to listen to me on the microphone. It was bad, but we're better now, and I'll be back again next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.